Hello everyone and welcome to Outriders New Horizon. In today's video we're going to explore a Devastator Anomaly power build using the Martial set to inflict as much debuffs as possible and deal high burst DPS. Initially I was planning to test this in a group, however many of you may know that I had an unfortunate event and I lost my resources, so I don't dare to join multiplayer, so I made a couple of adjustments in order to use this build for solo without losing DPS. However, I'm going to show you what I was initially planning to use for multiplayer because it offers much more debuffs against enemies. It has pretty decent DPS, however, the build I'm going to show you now, it's more sustained for solo, but it's up to you what you're going to choose. I'm not going to try for multiplayer yet until they fix it. So without any further delay, let's have a closer look at the build, starting with the skills. Initially I was going to use Endless Mass, Gravity Leap and Boulder Dash. These three skills combined with the Martial set offer the best debuffs for the Devastator. However, for solo the Boulder Dash wasn't as impressive as I hoped, and against bosses Endless Mass can be useless because once they become immune you cannot affect them. That's why I made it more sustained by adding Earthquake, and this will be our main source of DPS and bleed. I also tried with Impale, however it has much more dreadful cooldown and much more dreadful animation, although the base damage is higher because the earthquake damage like this is while buffed with mods, and Impale can offer much higher damage, however it doesn't work as well compared to Earthquake. Let's move on to the armor and mods. Endless Mass is going to affect the enemies, debuff them not as much compared to the multiplayer variant, however it increases the anomaly damage they take. It will make 4 of them share anomaly damage and weapon damage. Our Earthquake will bleed the enemies and will deal additional damage to bleeding enemies, and also our Gravity Leap will apply a debuff to enemies for a few seconds, so they will take up to 4 times additional anomaly damage for 5 seconds. That scales with our weapon mods, and that's why we can deal high burst damage in a very short period of time. As for the weapons, the Damascus offering although could be the best option because of the attributes of the status power of the skill hits, however because we have Endless Mass, the Funeral Pyre is the superior option, because if you hip fire it and you hit the enemies that gathered from the Endless Mass, you will summon multiple Shadow Comments, Claymore Torrents, and you can just devastate enemies very fast, although it lacks a little bit in single target DPS, but we don't care, we have also the Guillotine or the Anomaly Shotgun, Radiation Splash, Morning Winds, or some additional DPS. As far for the sidearm, I don't get the opportunity to use it, however I do have, just in case, I have the opportunity to proc a Kinetic Stomp, Storm Whip, or something like that. As far as our talents, I focused higher in the Seismic Shifter to increase our skill damage, lower the cooldowns for both our Earthquake, Air Kinetic skills, and I went a little bit to the Vanquisher tree to get the Perpetual Motion. I avoid taking the nodes for the bleed damage because honestly compared to the classic bleed Devastator, we don't have the time to deal enough bleed to the enemies, we kill them very fast and we don't take so much advantage of these nodes. I just took into the fray, although with these 2 modes from Protected by the Anomaly and Skill Sentry, you will be armor capped and resistant capped, and it will be very hard to die, but this is just an additional, let's say, flex slot to make things a little easier. In case you don't like that, you can go for Colossus or some additional bleed damage. Let's have a closer look at the differences when we use the maximum debuff for the group Devastator. We're using Boulder Dash instead of Earthquake, and as you can see our cooldowns are much better. Endless Mass and Gravity Leap have 7.6 seconds cooldown. As far as I know, this is the best cooldown we can get. Boulder Dash 8.4 seconds, but this is mostly for debuffing the enemies, because now as you can see the differences in the modes we have bleed them all, so we can apply bleed to all enemies using the Endless Mass. We have Primal Weakness, so permanently reducing resistance of all enemies hit by Boulder Dash by 50%. And we also have the mosh speed, so Endless Mass now inflicts vulnerable to all enemies. And we also replaced the extra mode with Human Comet to have a little bit of extra DPS. Human Comet is actually the flex slot, you can replace this with Primal Rage, so you can reduce the skill cooldown by 50%, but you lose a lot of damage because our Gravity Leap hits like a truck with this mode, but it depends if you want to lower the cooldown or if you want to do more damage, it depends on you. Personally, I do prefer Human Comet because Boulder Dash will be more useful against certain elites or bosses, so you don't have to spam it. Our talents have changed in order to have the best cooldowns possible for our kinetic skills. We start with a Warden tree, so we can get Perpetual Motion 1, Perpetual Motion here, and the final Perpetual Motion from the Seismic Shifter. This way we achieve the best cooldowns for Endless Mass and Gravity Leap in order to use them as frequent as possible while in a group. As far for survivability and damage, we lose a little bit because now we lack a little of Anomaly power, we have 130,000 compared to originally 150,000, and survivability is quite decent. We have, without any defense mods, 64% physical damage reduction and 20% resistance. However, we have the Stone Circle and through the mob to further increase our armor for each enemy in close range, and also you have the Halum armor to steal some of enemies while they die in close range. So in conclusion, in case you intend to go for solo, I do recommend to go with the first build. It has much more sustained DPS, much better against single target for bosses, elites, much easier to apply bleed. However, in case you go with a group, and especially a little inexperienced, let's say, group, for example, they cannot apply vulnerable, you can just take up this role, apply vulnerable, reduce their resistances, debuff the enemies to take extra anomaly damage for all sources, modes and skills, and just be a very good debuffer that assists the group while doing damage. Another video will be released soon to the channel with a more in-depth analysis about the modes, the weapons, what other things I tried and worked or haven't worked. However, I haven't tried the group build while in a group, but I will try to provide as much feedback as I can because I tested this in solo, and that's why I decided to rework it and do a better version while running solo. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch my video. Feel free to like if you liked, and you can subscribe to stay tuned for more upcoming videos for Outriders, New Horizon and other video games. And as always, I wish you all a wonderful day.